Nice to see you again. I'm Dr. Hollister. Has been from Rhode Island, working family. It's been a little bit. I want to start. I rise here for strong support of this bill, the $15 an hour minimum wage, and I want to start with one fact that I think has been missing from the discussion so far, which is just how pervasive low wages are in Rhode Island. I think it's easy for us sitting here doing the kind of work we all do to miss that, but raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour in Rhode Island would impact 1/3 of all workers. There are a lot of people who make less than $15 an hour, and even more who are really close. And I think the other thing is we should be really honest about what the real impacts of a minimum wage that is inadequate to meet even a single person's needs are. Our current minimum wage is $10.10. That's good. That's better than it was last year. We're appreciative of the work of the legislature on that front. But even so, if you worked 40 hours a week every week and never had to take an unpaid sick day and never had to take a vacation day, you would only earn $22,000 in a year. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we know that that's not enough even for an individual to live on. It wouldn't have been enough for me to live on even when I was young in my first job out of college and not aspiring to own a house or anything like that. So the minimum wage is inadequate for someone to live on. There are also a lot of misconceptions about who makes the minimum wage. I think I hear a lot of arguments about it being like a young kid working at an ice cream shop. That's not really who makes the minimum wage in Rhode Island. Most of these workers are over the age of 25. Most of them are women. They're disproportionately people of color. Lots of parents, lots of people with some college education. Lots of people actually trying to make ends meet on the minimum wage. And even those workers who are young people are contributing substantially to their family's income. Teenagers on average or across families in Rhode Island are contributing 10% to their family's income. If we talk about low-wage families, teenagers are contributing 25% to their family income. So even if we're talking about young workers, we're talking about really important income to low-wage families. I also want to mention that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is related to the issue we were talking about earlier, which is closing the pay gap between men and women and between races. For the lowest wage workers, raising the minimum wage actually does more to compress that pay gap than anything else. Nearly eliminates it. We've heard a couple of people talk about benefits cliff and about public benefits. I don't particularly share their way of thinking about it, but this does indeed interact with public benefits. Right now we have employers in Rhode Island, because they are allowed to pay less than a living wage, they're paying less than a living wage, and the rest of us are therefore kicking in to help support families who don't make enough to make ends meet. They are socializing the costs of poverty to the rest of us. So one thing is that one thing we know about the minimum wage, there have been a number of arguments tonight about how it somehow hurts the people it's trying to help. There's been a lot of research on that. Doug Hall will probably talk about it more later. It's quite clear that the one thing raising the minimum wage does for sure do is help low-wage workers. It does actually put more money in their pockets. They do have it to spend in their local economy, and the evidence is pretty clear that they don't therefore lose their jobs. And even when you see small effects of people working fewer hours, that is actually a desired effect, right? What happens right now if you only earn $10.10 an hour? You're working more than one job. So it would be a good outcome here if people went up to $15 an hour and therefore weren't working 80 hours a week, but instead only 50 or 60. They'd have more time with their families, etc. I want to address the restaurant concerns here a little bit. First of all, I think there's a lot of talk about eliminating tipping in this. There's nothing in this bill that eliminates tipping. What it does is slowly, gradually, over the course of many years, phase out the sub-minimum tipped wage, which means that servers would make $15 an hour plus tips. Now, this is the case in a lot of states in the country. It's very different. We're not familiar with it here in Rhode Island. We've always had the sub-minimum tipped wage, but in 7 states in the country, the minimum wage and the sub-tipped minimum wage are the same. People do not tip less in those places. It's very consistent how much Americans tip state to state. It doesn't matter how much the minimum wage is for servers. The thing that is different is that servers make more money. You heard from a bunch of people whose service employees seem to be doing pretty well. That's great. The average server, though, makes something much more like the actual minimum wage here. And so by eliminating the sub-minimum tipped wage and having those folks make tips, we make low tip service jobs, living wage jobs, and places where people are also making high tips. Those are middle class jobs. There's no reason they shouldn't be make the kind of income that previously people used to make working factory jobs or something like that. I want to say one thing about small businesses because I don't cede that space. I come from a small business working family, right? I grew up with my dad and mom ran a toy store together. And they always paid their people more than minimum wage. They did not pay them $15 an hour. And, you know, budding leftist that I was, I asked my father about this. And what he said to me, I remembered my whole life working on this stuff, and that is when you're a toy store, you're in competition with the Walmart down the street, right? They sell a lot of the same stuff. And he said, I would love to pay my people more. I can't do that unless everybody does it together, because I need to be charging a somewhat competitive price for the products that I'm selling here. So minimum wage and raising it legislatively is really important because it's a thing we all need to do together in order for it to be something that small businesses can do at all.